Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This week we're going to try something a little bit different. We have a guest on, we'll call him Dave, and he's going to tell us about a change that he went through. A psychological change, perhaps a profound psychological change. How's it going, Dave?
It's going great.
So I got the idea to do this. I took a road trip this past summer across the United States, and most of what we were listening to in the car was this podcast called How I Built This. It's an NPR podcast. The host is Guy Raz. And they just talk to entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs. How did you build this company? What was your story? And I thought, you know what, this would be a great idea for a podcast because I think a lot of what we hear in culture is people don't really change. And then you see these studies, 80% of your behavior, 80% of your personality, maybe up to 90% is determined by your genetics. People don't really change. But people do change. I mean, I know people do change. Maybe it's not the norm, but I think a lot of people are out there who want to change. And I think there's common elements among people who do change. And so that's what we're going to talk to you about. So you went through a profound change recently. Could you maybe give us the gist of it to start?
Yeah, so broad strokes is recently my girlfriend and I had our first baby together, and that in and of itself is certainly a life-changing event. But the way I've kind of described it to some people that I've talked to about it is really the hardware upgrade or just kind of emotional, psychological feeling that immediately rushed over me as soon as I was able to hold my son for the first time is something that I've really still have a bit of an issue articulating to an extent, but it's something that I didn't expect to come on the way it did.
Okay, could you maybe articulate it to some extent, to whatever extent you're capable right now? I mean, you don't have to go into full detail, but maybe we can flesh it out here. But
Yeah, sure. So I know that oftentimes they talk about how when the changes that the woman goes through during pregnancy is profound, and I think it takes a little bit of catching up, and it certainly took me some catching up with her. But as soon as I get to hold him for the first time, this rush of whether that be endorphins or, like I said, it's almost like an upgrade to my psychological state about how I thought about things, how I process things, was just it was so immediate that I didn't expect it, and it's something that even now when whether I'm shopping for groceries or buying coffee or working out, I think about things in a totally different light that uh, I had not anticipated thinking about in that way.
yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that you have more awareness now, or maybe a more of an idea that, wow, my life really matters.
Yes,
What I do
absolutely. So
matters.
I,
Yeah.
I guess some personal background and context is I finished graduate school a couple of years ago, and for a period of time post grad school, getting into my career, I had a real sense of rudderlessness. Didn't really know where I was going or what I was doing, just kind of floating along in life, and that was a challenge in and of itself. But having him in this world has made my desire to be a better partner in my relationship stronger, and has made my desire to work, whether that's something that I'm doing as a side job, something just kind of an extra hustle on the side, or my actual work in my career job. I'm much more motivated just in the day in, day out. And this could be sort of a baby honeymoon sort of thing that he just got here, and time will tell for that. But I certainly feel differently waking up than I ever have in the past.
Yeah, who knows where he'll be at in a year. So how old is your son?
He just turned 2 months.
Okay, so this is all very new.
Yes, yeah,
Who
very
knows?
new.
You could have a serious drinking problem in a couple of years. But for now, for now, you feel the change.
It's almost interesting that you mentioned the drinking problem because some of the guys that go to my gym are big about sobriety, and I've had zero desire to have a single drink since he's been born. And I was a not a regular drinker, but a bottle of wine every couple of weeks, kind of thing, six pack once a week, once every 10 days to 2 weeks, kind of a drinker. Yeah, but I haven't had a drop, not because I've been actively avoiding it. It just hasn't been something that I've been like, oh, it's Friday after work, I think I'll have a beer. It's just like, it's Friday after work, I want to go home and hang out with this newborn and be able to like play good music for him, or read something out loud to him. It's a totally different, um, I guess, a totally different wiring of my internal kind of default psychology.
Yeah, so it's not like you're like, well, I do want a beer, but I got to be there for my son. It's you don't even think about it. You're like, I just want to be there.
Correct.
No internal struggle at all. So that's interesting. You said you went to graduate school, yet you still felt rudderless. So you
Yeah,
knew what you wanted to do, but you weren't really sure exactly, maybe.
yeah, to an extent. I may have tied kind of my hopes and dreams to not a pie in the sky sort of thing, but I really got involved after I quit sports. And once I got through high school, I quit sports. I was competitive, but not a great athlete, and transitioned that into being involved in competitive speech and debate, and then went to graduate school to continue to coach speech and debate, and also wanted to be a speechwriter. And I've worked on some local campaigns in my town that I live in now, but it has not come to fruition the way I would have liked it to have. So ended up with kind of an office-y 9 to 5 sort of thing, which is nice. And the job is fulfilling, this job that I'm in now. But I had a couple of years where I was really trying to get off the ground with being a speechwriter that was challenging, and that led to some kind of internal conflict that it maybe wasn't. It was the first time in my life I'd really had to deal with a lot of internal conflict, and not being able to just come out of the gate and just kill it. Essentially, just I never struggled in school, never struggled in sports or anything where I've had a pretty easy life. And then I got thrown kind of that curveball of, well, you're done with school, things aren't going the way you want it to be. What are you going to do? And I always just kind of reminded me of the Mike Tyson quote of everyone has a game plan until they get punched in the face. And
Yeah.
I had a 6 month period where life kind of punched me in the face, and I didn't really know. It took me a little bit of time to get back up off the mat, but was able to get that lined out.
Yeah, I think that's a fundamental thread throughout all change is that it's always way more difficult, or we have to put in more effort than we previously thought. We have a very difficult time estimating the amount of effort that something's going to take, some kind of challenge is going to take. So yeah, it's a great Mike Tyson quotation about everybody has a plan. Yeah, your plan didn't really take into consideration how badly you were going to get hit.
Yeah,
Almost
no,
no
it's
plan ever does.
yeah, for sure. It's I think there's another line I think I've heard attributed to one of the branches of the military of hope for the best, prepare for the worst. And I just always hoped for the best and never had to really prepare for the worst, because the worst never really came to me, and it still hasn't. I've not had an issue of unemployment or anything like that. I just was thought I'd get out of school and just start writing speeches for a successful campaign, and it just campaigns weren't as
Yeah.
successful as would have liked them to be.
Right. Yeah, I'll just send out 3 resumes. I'll probably get one call back from 3 resumes, something like that. Yeah, who hasn't been through there? Okay,
Yeah,
good.
no,
So
it's.
I'm sorry, go.
Oh, I was gonna say, yeah, and my in my experience, it had been like, I'm gonna apply to 5 graduate programs, so I got into all 5. I'll take whichever one gives me the best financial package, and then after school it was, oh, I guess
Yeah.
I'll send out 5 resumes, and then nothing happened, and then 10, and then 20, and after about 100 or so, it started to get kind of discouraging, but finally landed into a good spot.
Yeah. That's good. I think a lot of people go through that. Their estimation of what it takes is just not really what it takes, and it's not their fault. They just don't know. They just don't really know what's required of them. Okay, so good. You said you're going through some internal conflict at this and during this period. How did that manifest? Like, were
Uh,
you thinking, "Oh man, I'm a loser," or "Man, nothing's going to happen for me," or did you have your girlfriend at this time?
I did not. That was kind of part of it. Was I was when I finished grad school, since I was moving away, I ended a 2 year relationship because we were moving to different parts of the country. So me and the previous girlfriend, ended that relationship about 4 years ago now, and um, yeah. So then I was single. I was in a different town. I was in a new job, and the job wasn't. It was a very entry level, mundane, remedial task, factory work kind of a thing that I didn't really want to be doing, but had to had to put food in the fridge and a roof over the head. So had to do these things. And I know some people really find kind of a meditation in being able to go in and do that same thing every day. It wasn't for me. I needed more of a challenge, and
Hmm.
yeah, just life wasn't challenging me the way I wanted it to be, and that led to kind of just some senses of gosh, is this all there is? Is it just wake up, go to clock in, go home, go to work, drink the same beer, watch the same TV show? Like, this isn't what I'm used to. I'm used to having papers and deadlines and stuff, and all of a sudden I don't have any deadline. I don't have any structure. I know a lot of people really now seem to really value the idea of that personal freedom of being transient, or however you wanted to say that. But I've always thrived on having some sort of structure. I'm sure that's a byproduct of being involved in sports and stuff like that for a long time. But when my structure was very simple and it wasn't challenging, that led to just those issues of, gosh, this is all it is. It reminded me of the commencement speech, "This is Water" by David Foster Wallace, of that
Right.
idea that idea of no one tells you or teaches you like the really difficult thing about growing up and being an adult is dealing with the mundane day in and day out grind.
Yeah. Alienation, it sounds like you're just maybe disconnected. You're not really sure what you want to do. Yeah, it's strange because you go from maybe 16, 17, and 9 hours of your day is planned out for you.
Hmm.
And then maybe to grad school and other things, a lot of things are planned out. Then from that to nothing. Now it's like, yeah, you're basically on your own. You got to show up to work on time, but everything else is up to you. And there's this, yeah, real sense of emptiness, I think, especially when you're not prepared for it. And nobody really talks about it. I mean, David Foster Wallace does in that speech, but yeah, it's this thing that doesn't really come up for you. And then on top of it, then you're in the grocery aisle, and then some guy's walking down the aisle, and he's not wearing deodorant. He reeks, and it just hits you in the face, and you get super pissed. And it's not that the guy smells, it's that the guy smells on top of, man, I'm totally alienated, and I'm not sure what I'm doing. And then this on top of everything else, I have to wait in this line in this grocery store.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it's
when you're not prepared for it, it really can really get to you.
yeah, no, I, at least for me, I tried to supplement by, I was like, okay, well, I'll get up 2 hours before work, I'll go run, I'll go lift, I'll do all these things, but then, yeah, but then that just also kind of, I think, was for me at least with school, where it was like the challenge of, can you write this 30 to 60 page paper? Can you read, 300 pages a week? Can you do all this stuff that you're required to do, when there wasn't the requirement of, other than going to work on time, other stuff that I used to do to fill the time of the day was like, oh, well, I guess I can go do this. I guess I can read this new Stephen King book. I guess I can watch this new TV show, but do I really care that much about it? And that's, God, not really. And
Yeah, you're
that
just
led
filling
to,
time. Mhm.
yeah, that led to that like alienation to the world. And I don't know why I was able to kind of overcome it. I did seek some counseling, like, for a little bit, but I've always felt that I prided myself really well on being able to say, it's important to accept and admit that people need help sometimes, and I think people do a really bad job of that, which leads to kind of that feeling of alienation, and then people internalize it more and more, and that's when you get into some real trouble, I think.
I mean, people do a bad job of reaching out for help.
Yes, or just like bad job of being self-aware and admitting to themselves like, oh, maybe I can't, maybe I'm having a hard time doing this thing on my own, this thing of life.
Yeah, yeah, right. Like you said, even admitting that there is a problem or that you need to do something else, people will just tune themselves out of it. And yeah, there's a lot of great ways to tune ourselves out of our issues. I mean, even healthy ways to tune ourselves out of our issues, like you mentioned, like just working out. I mean, which is great, obviously, but people can really use that as a crutch. And they can't, and yeah, it's a great distraction of facing the issues they really need to face, which is, man, what am I even doing in this world? What do I even want to
Hmm.
be doing?
Yeah, and one thing that I kind of came to realize, and maybe to shift gears a little bit of it, anyways, is that I think that it's important to try and fail at things. I tried and failed at a few things, obviously, and one of the things that I started to realize when I was back out into the real world and dealing with the day-to-day possibility of failure to an extent, is that one of the things that's really been taken away from us is the opportunity to know when you failed, especially with the internet. If you send out a resume and you never get a call back, you assume that you failed, but you don't even know. The same thing with dating.
Hmm.
Dating became difficult. Most of my other relationships have been cultivated by face-to-face interaction, sitting next to a girl in class, being in the same uh, hallway with them in high school, parties in college, being in the same cohort in grad school, stuff like that. But you start using the online dating apps where instead of without a girl being like, no, I'm not interested. No, you're nice, but we're just friends. That kind of thing that inevitably you have to go
Yeah.
through when when they swipe left or right, and you don't know, like, well, maybe they're just not even looking at their Tinder. Like, no, you're
Yeah.
getting rejected without knowing you're getting rejected.
Yeah, it's because your face is wrong. That's why you're getting rejected. Yeah, I think there's something very, I mean, it's painful, but I would very much consider it the opposite of whatever we feel alienation to be. And that is when you go and talk to a girl and you can just see in her face. You can see in her face that she's not interested. And there's no hiding it. She can pretend to be polite and, oh, yeah, thanks. Oh, yeah, this is nice. But you can just see that she's not interested.
Yeah.
That kind of gut check, yeah, we're missing that. And I've always said about things like Tinder, it can be great, especially guys can in a huge dry spell, it can be helpful. It can be a helpful crutch. But if you really want to get better with girls and not just sleep with more, you got to experience that face-to-face rejection. It
No,
is
yeah, that's
instructive, I think, on an unconscious level, and nothing's ever going to replace that. No, like online pickup guy or whatever internet guru is ever going to help you with that kind of instruction.
no, not at all.
Yeah. Okay, so how was your relationships during this time? So you broke up with that girl, because you're moving to different parts of the country. But so how did you meet this girlfriend that you have now?
We actually met via another app. We used it was through Hinge. So I mean, I don't take away from the benefits of online dating. And I certainly use the apps, but I also would go to bars and stuff like that, and had my share of bad luck with them in those capacities as well. But I found that my girlfriend, now that we've been together for about 4 years, I found that the way we started our relationship, and I think because of the kind of app that we were in a medium of, where there was a little more of a background, and we messaged and texted for quite a while before we met up and really became more. I guess it was almost like a more of a classic kind of courtship to an extent, where we didn't get physical very quickly, and I think it probably benefit both of us. Were in our late 20s at the time, and we're both in places with our career and with our life that we wanted to be able to find something meaningful and make sure that we had a connection, and went on some vacations and stuff like that first, before we got involved, and then we went on vacations and things of that nature, and were able to go through some of the hardships of a young relationship, of a meaningful relationship, that maybe we hadn't gone through in the same order prior to in other relationships that we'd had.
Fascinating. I've heard that this happened. So you went on a vacation with the girl even though you weren't sleeping with her.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a long vacation, but we did a 3 day kind of stay in a hotel, just a few hours away from where we live in a bigger city, and just went and did kind of, ate at nicer restaurants and went to a play, that kind of stuff. Just a very long, extended date, about, oh, 2, 3 months into dating.
Oh boy, so did you have a pep talk with your crotch area? Like, okay, I know what you want here, but I'm playing the long game. I know you don't understand, but I have this different plan. I know it sounds crazy. Maybe this will work out.
Yeah, effectively, yeah. And I think after we'd been together for and became more serious, we talked about that trip, and um, she had a similar pep talk with her crotch area too. So is that we were both on the same page, but we were both trying to, I don't know what we were trying to do, be more adult or more mature, or try to know the other person more so than just be physical.
Yeah, I get it. You know, if that's what you decide to do for you, I can understand how that could be helpful. I think the main problem there isn't that people jump into the sack too soon or too late. It's they don't even have a plan. They don't even have idea of how they want their courtship to work. So
Yeah,
it makes it very difficult to have a courtship,
yeah,
right?
and I mean, I don't know. I would almost even say further it a little bit that the notion of a courtship is almost a an alien thing now. People don't even participate in a courtship often, or nearly as often as traditionally you might say. Just the idea of, oh, you've been out with someone 3 times and you haven't had sex with them. It's almost almost odd now.
Well, I would say courtship can involve sex. I mean, you can have sex on the first date and it's still courtship, but it's just like what's your way of connecting with a woman?
Fair enough. Yeah.
Or just that, or what's the purpose of it? Do you communicate that purpose to her? You know, why are we going out on a date together? Is it just because that's what we're supposed to do? Or is there some kind of value that we're both going to give and get out of this relationship? And how do you communicate that? Now, maybe that's a little bit intense to communicate on the first date, but overall, I think that that's an important part of the implicit communication and another inoculation to this alienation that we all go through.
No, I agree with that. Yes. I guess maybe in my mind it had always been a the measure of a man was the notches in his bedpost sort of an idea, and I had not had bad relationships, but I hadn't had one that I had thought was going to. I'd only had one previous that we thought had like that long term conversation of where could this go, and that was also one that had been a slow lead up to the physical intimacy. And other ones that I'd had previously had been shorter term and had been like quick to get to the physical part. And then after that, like, oh, well, if I can't be who I really am with this person, then all we're doing is the physical. And that wasn't what I wanted moving forward. And that's not what she wanted moving forward either. And we
Yeah.
were able to communicate that to each other. And I think that we've both had conversations to this point that we're in a very healthy relationship, very open communication about lots of things, and obviously we're planning on getting married at some point, and we have a child together, and all the kind of things that are still benchmarks of growing up to many people. But now we're
Mhm.
both in good places because of the way that we handled this, I think.
Yeah, well, so it sounds like that your awareness was building even before your son was born.
Yes. And I think that it just took. I think they had been incremental stair step um, kind of methods or just increments in a stair step way of being more self aware about what I wanted in life, who I wanted it with, things of that nature, and then the we said to kind of loop back to the with him being born, the just the shift and the rush of like all of a sudden I really knew what I was supposed to do, and how I was supposed to be. Um, I said it's difficult to articulate, and hopefully other people that listen to this have experienced something like this, or maybe other people with kids can also say, yeah, I understand it. But um, when he was born, he came out and they took him into like this little side room, and they're kind of roughing him up, making sure he's he cries and all that kind of stuff. So I follow back there with him. Oh, doctor finishes up with mom, and one of the nurses is like, yeah, I'm kind of not really hands off or anything, but I was like, can I touch him? I'm just trying to stay out of your way while you guys do doctor stuff. And she's like, you can touch him. And I kind of put my hand down towards him. He's got his little hands reaching out, and he grabbed a hold of my finger. And it was like that first moment of skin to skin contact with something that I had helped make, even in a very, very short, you know, clunky way.
Not that short,
Was
not that short. I
no,
mean, longer
no,
than you would
no.
expect, of course.
Yes, better than average.
Oh yeah, of
But
course.
yeah, but he grabbed my finger, and it was just like that was when it all changed. That's like the new chapter of life really started. I'm sure that her new chapter of life had started the first time she, saw the 2 lines on the pregnancy test and all that. But for me, it was like actually having that physical touch with him that became just a whole, to use kind of a colloquial phrase though, the game done changed. It's like this is
Mhm.
different now.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting. Yeah, just seeing him maybe wasn't enough, but actually touching him, like maybe some kind of physical proximity, really encouraged. It just sounds like a connection with this son.
Yeah, no, it absolutely was like I saw the ultrasounds and I felt the kicks through her stomach and stuff like that. But it was just the actual physical touch, um, just solidified that connection uh, that we had, and it was uh, it was a remarkable thing, and it was something that I said I will probably always struggle to really put into terms. And my friends that also have kids have really resonated. Like, yeah, it's all we really say to each other when we talk about it is it's something, isn't it? And it really is.
Yeah, well, that's a spiritual experience, it sounds like, and a spiritual experience is noted by the fact that you can't really put it into terms. That's the point of it. I mean, you can try, you can talk about it in different ways, but it's constantly changing, and it's probably going to constantly mean something new to you as your son grows up, and then he turns 14 and yelling at you, "I hate you, Dad!" Oh, and all this stuff, and that's going to bring different awareness
Oh, for sure.
to that experience. Not in a bad
Yeah, I
way,
mean,
of
I
course,
started to
just different.
doing like the realizations of like this is someone that I'm gonna have to teach, how to do, or at least co-teach how to do everything that like I've always taken for granted. I take for granted, walking, talking, going to the bathroom, not in my pants, kind of a thing. Like I have to teach
Uh-huh.
this other person how to do all this stuff, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, this changes everything. And yeah, it is very much a spiritual, akin to any kind of religious experience. And uh, we are not religious people, but it is certainly a uh, a religious kind of. I think I maybe can say that I understand what people talk about when they say that they've talked to God, or that sort of thing. Like I may not talk to the same God you do, but I've felt something that is magical to an extent. And I think that also firmly rerouted some of my, um, like, I know that your field is psychology, and that's what this is rooted in. But I think that this experience and the magic of birth really kind of changed kind of my psychology on a lot of stuff.
Mhm. Again, and you think it has something mostly to do with the fact that now you're just bringing more awareness to everything.
Yeah, and I have to think about, I'm no longer just thinking about me. Even when we lived together for the last year and a half or so, was still thinking mostly about me. We had separate money. We had separate everything. We just lived together, shared a lot of experiences together. But I'd go out with my friends. She'd go out with her friends. She'd have girls' night. I'd have guys' night, stuff like that. And all of a sudden now there's really not as much of that. Um, oh,
Mhm.
I guess I'm not going to buy, you know, the whatever steaks this week because we got to buy diapers. So yeah, it's stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah, just little things like that that can I can see build up. Has your feelings for your son, has this generalized into the world at large? I mean, something that I talk about is contribution. People talk about giving back, giving back to your community. I think that's a small way to think about it. But I think when you reach a stage of generativity, which tends to happen when you have children, you begin to realize, wait, my life isn't just about me, it's about the world. And about, people say making the world a better place, but at least contributing something, changing something, even if it's just, coaching the local wrestling team and having some kind of connection with these kids. Are you starting to see that now with your son that, well, maybe, I mean, obviously that's more about him now. Your life is more about him, but can you generalize that out to just being more about the world in general?
Yeah, for sure. And I think even some of the choices that we have made, just in the little bit of time that he's been with us and on Earth, is that we've made choices to go and engage in community activities that we probably would not have before. Holiday events for families. I've talked with people at my gym that I used to not talk with. I used to just go in, put headphones on, and get in and get out, get my lift in, and now that I've started talking to guys that I have seen show up with kids before, and like just like, oh yeah, I've just recently had a baby, and we talk about just fatherhood sort of things, and setting examples and stuff like that. Where yeah, it's definitely just solidified my position that I'm not just a cog in the machine, but a part of an ecosystem that is multifaceted.
Yeah, I could see wanting to talk to this guy at the gym because hey, maybe he'll be there to babysit my kid one day. But in fostering that connection, it's also I know I'm making a different kind of connection. Obviously, it's not as serious as the connection that I had when I first reached out and my son grabbed my finger. But it's a connection in that vein. Again, not to that same extent, but a similar kind of connection. And now I'm making more of these connections, which is probably bringing perhaps more awareness to your life.
No, absolutely. It's I sometimes think of him as being and the way kind of the people I talk to, the people I've connected with, more so now than I used to. It's kind of like the ripples on a pond when you throw a stone in the middle. That he's the stone or the rock, and the connections and the community that we're building outside of our small family um, are the ripples. And it's like, oh,
Right.
the it's just kind of the world is growing in a different way.
Yeah. Kind of makes you look at church differently. I know you said you weren't that religious, but people go to, let's just say, the typical Christian church and worship baby Jesus. It's like, are you worshiping baby Jesus or are you worshiping babies or infancy or the relationship between the baby Jesus and Madonna and the Mother Mary? Are you just worshiping that? And then you come to church and worship that. And the real benefit of church, or one of the benefits I'll say, is, well, now you're talking to more people. You came for the baby Jesus, but now you're staying to create connections with people.
Yeah, I know. I think that the community aspect of church is what draws a lot of people in, maybe more so than the religion Jesus aspect of it now. I know that I had to read portions of the book Bowling Alone when I was in school in some class that I took, and I know that the idea of community just going away, that people don't go to the Rotary Club or bowling or
Right.
the
Yeah.
friars or whatever anymore. And people still do, kind of to loop back to the talk of what we've lost with the online dating stuff, that we've, in a sense, I think people have lost the sense of togetherness and community, and people still do seek that out and strive to have that sometimes.
Right. Yeah, but it's just becoming more difficult.
Hmm.
We have this thing called YouTube, or perhaps even worse, you porn.
Yeah.
It just makes it really easy to just stay in your hole and not do anything. Yeah, so
No,
what kind
it's
of just to compare your life now to how it was before, I mean, what kind of vices did you have? Or maybe vices that you didn't even see were vices back before you had a child, but now not only do you stop doing them, but the way that you look at them, you're like, oh, maybe that was kind of bad. Maybe that was hurting me.
oh yeah, I mean, not not a ton. I've always been a reasonably healthy individual. There is a it's a small chain, I think, of bars that are beer bars that offer kind of a stamp for every different beer you get, and I'm a completionist and would go and they have
Yeah.
600 different kinds of beers, and you get your name on the wall at a certain number. Like, I was like, I want to get my name on that wall, so it's going or spending too much money on that, trying to get all these stamps for trying different beers.
Yeah, it becomes
Um,
like a trophy thing. Yeah, don't do that to me like the Boy Scouts. Oh, I got to get the next badge.
yeah,
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 don't do
there's
that for beers. That's a bad way to reinforce my behavior. Please stop. Right?
yeah. So I was doing that, and I've
Funny.
certainly toned down the drinking. Not that I was a drinker per se before, but I'd have maybe 3 to 4 beers a week before. Now it's I'm trying to think of I think I had one beer last week. So it's definitely just, and part of that too is new baby. The energy isn't, the desire isn't there for sure, but also I just, the energy's not there, but also I just don't have the desire to do it. And then I never really used much other recreational drugs or anything like that. I watch too much live PD. I definitely don't watch too much live PD on the weekends now.
What's live PD? I've never heard of that.
It's like Cops, but it's 3 hour blocks and it's live. It's just the
Oh.
worst people. I mean, I just learned that no one in America has a driver's license and everyone has weed on them at all times.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So
I haven't heard of that. That's
yeah, it's on A&E, and it's Friday and Saturday 3 hour block of just following police around and people talking crap. It's and I just watched too much of that because it'd be the end of the work week and it would just be so mindless. Just order a pizza and yeah, sit there on the couch and watch crap TV and eat pizza. Now that I'm like, guess I'll make a chicken Caesar salad and I'll sit here and read Wendell Berry to my son. You know,
yeah. Okay, good. How's your relationships changed? I mean, not just with your girlfriend, but what about your family? What about your mom and dad?
I mean, my dad wasn't. My dad is much more introverted than I am. So I was actually really surprised at kind of his reaction and excitement to having a grandson. He's
Uh-huh.
been very involved, and I mean, it was maybe the second or third time in my life I've seen my dad cry. Was watching him kind of come see him in the hospital, and yeah,
Wow.
him doing the same thing of my dad putting his hand down there in his little hand, grabbing my dad's index finger, and then watching my dad get emotional about that was really interesting. Um, my mom has always been very hands-on. She was a very prototypical stay-at-home Midwestern mother, room mother, and all that kind of stuff when I was a kid. And she's been, certainly like, well, we'll cook dinner and bring it out every Friday, and stuff like that. So she's been exactly how I expect her to be. My dad has been the exception to what I anticipated, and to an extent, I have too emotionally. I probably cried more times the last 2 months than I have in the last 15 years.
Hmm.
I
Well,
mean,
that
it
could
was
be that could be part of the sympathy pregnancy that men go through.
yeah. I don't know. I was never an overly emotional person, especially with those kinds of emotions. But and it could have easily been because of uh, the sleep deprivation of being in the hospital. We were in the hospital for a few days, nothing really complicated. They just had to keep an eye on his blood sugars. His blood sugar was low when he was born, and uh, I had a absolute breakdown in the hospital room when his blood sugar passed for 24 straight hours, and they were like, "All right, we can start planning on you guys going home." I think I was probably just ready to go home as much as anything, but I had just an absolute emotional weeping breakdown, which I had never had since the last time I really cried about anything was when we won state championship in football when I was in high school.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So what were you going through when you cried? Just was it relief or man, things are gonna be okay, or man, I'm so thankful for this that his blood sugar is fine. I'm really gonna work to keep him healthy. I mean,
Yeah, it was all of that. Just like God, thankfully he's healthy. We can go home. Everything's going to be fine. It was tears of joy. It was just such an emotional relief because we'd been there for 3 days and he'd pass for 12 hours and he'd fail one that would reset the clock. And every time he would fail, it would reset the clock. And that took such a toll that finally, when they were like, all right, cool, we're not going to check anymore. He can go home. He's eating good on his own, all that kind of stuff. It was just like this, just such a weight off of me.
yeah, it's probably gonna help you a lot when he's 14 and yelling at you that he hates you. Just remembering, yeah, well, this is nothing because there was a time when I was really worried about your blood sugar, and yeah, it seems obvious, but also it kind of gets not really stated very often, at least explicitly, how important crying is when people changing. I mean, you just don't change without crying, and that's across the board. I don't know of any real study on this, but just from my experience, hearing from a lot of people and what they go through, I mean, just crying is a part of it. And I've even heard people say something to the extent of, yeah, so you talk about how crying is important. I just went home and made myself cry. I made myself cry, and that helped.
Huh. I haven't. No one's, but I certainly agree. No one's ever expressed anything like that to me. But Yeah, I absolutely agree that it was a fundamental part of the change was like to get back in touch with maybe that part of me that I had buried because I'm of an age. I don't know how old you are, but just age range where I'm still close enough to that idea of men don't cry sort of thing. Whether you want to call that toxic masculinity, which I tend to not use that phrase, but that idea that men don't cry, men act a certain way. I grew up close enough to that idea being prevalent in society that it was, I don't know how many times I apologized in the hospital to my significant other. Like, I'm sorry that I'm not being strong, and she's like, no, you've been, crying is strong. Being this emotional is strong. It's strong for a man to be this emotional, is what she kept telling me.
Well, this is something that I talk about a lot, especially, I deal with emotions and how important they are. And there's definitely a way to be emotional in a weak way, in a way that not only makes you weak, but other people question your integrity. But there's also a way to be emotional in a strong way. We don't have to go into it now, but I talk about a lot about that here at Animus and the different ways to process emotions. But yeah, men do not process emotions like women do, but I think it is important for men to be emotional just in a certain way. I guess
Yeah,
the
no,
point is if you're going to cry, try not to make a cry face.
yeah,
You can have tears running down your cheek, but if you're doing like the crunchy when your face crunches up, that's a good look for women, not such a great look for men. But thankfully,
yeah,
you don't have to make the cry face to process emotions. But
yeah.
look,
I
it
don't
makes
think
sense that that change requires some kind of crying because I've talked about the physiological of crying, physiological reasons behind crying, and it's essentially an intense emotional strain, a new emotional strain that your body simply can't handle. And crying's a way to process that, to help you process that. So yeah, whenever you get to these points, these neutron star density of emotion, especially new emotional experience, you're going to cry. So it makes sense that change will necessitate some kind of crying.
yeah, no, I'm with you there 100%. And I don't think that I ugly cried, so I think I
Okay,
avoided
good.
that.
Phew.
Yeah,
Uh, what a relief.
yeah, I think it was just more of a forehead against the back of a chair, just kind of just happiness. Just the emotion had to go somewhere. It was just an overflow of emotion.
Mm, okay, good. Well, good. Dave, I really like what you've been saying here. It just sounds like what you're going through, and it probably started to happen before you even had your son, is just more intense connections with more people who are more important to you. And I think
Yeah,
this has brought more awareness to your life, and with that awareness, yeah, you just as an example, you just don't look at that beer through the same eyes. You're not using the same lens, right? We don't see with our eyes, we see with our minds. Now you're bringing just a new mind to even looking at the beer and probably hundreds of other things that we're not even going to be able to get into today. And that's what caused the change.
yeah, no, I think it's those are all very good and fair points. Yeah, I had I had just those ideas of how life was supposed to go, and it didn't go that way, and that sent me on a bit of a course. And I was self-aware enough already to admit that I needed some help, and was able to reach out and seek some help, but also still had some substance kind of crutch issues to an extent, maybe, and kind of just put energy into that I probably didn't need to, and then getting involved in a relationship, and making sure that that was a healthy relationship that was going to be long term with someone who was had similar goals and similar mindset, was has been and will continue to be just really beneficial. I think to my and her mental health, and being able to raise our child in an open and loving household that, I think we'll both do our best to maybe talk about being self-aware and making sure that he knows that that it's okay to sometimes be emotional, and it's also okay to admit when you need help and stuff like that. I got pretty lucky with my parents compared to what other people get as far as the cards dealt. That my parents made sure that I was pretty well rounded leaving the house, but um, no one ever talks to you about the stuff that's the really hard stuff of just getting up every day at the same time and drinking the same coffee and seeing the same people and making the same drive to work and stuff like that.
Yeah, what makes that easier is just, I think, hearing you talk about it and just another information point of realization that, wow, I think pretty much everybody goes through this.
Hmm.
Okay, Dave, I'm going to ask you one more question here, and then I'll let you go. I know you have to get back to work, but okay, so you went through all this change. What do you think is the next step? Or maybe what's maybe the next blind spot that you don't see? Or the next iteration of change? Just trying to give you a bunch of ways to think about that.
Yeah, I guess the big thing will be, um, I mean, we're kind of in a place where we know what we're dealing with to an extent for at least a little while, but I am curious in a lot of ways to see how things go in 4-ish years now when he starts going to school, because I think that'll be yeah, that'll be a big change. I mean, we'll obviously have milestones between then and now. Buying a house is next on the list, of real big thing kind of things to tackle. Um, and then that'll just be an emotional and financial stressor on our relationship, just moving forward, getting married, stuff like that, that we have talked about and intend to do. But those are kind of the next hurdles that are on the horizon, that we have kind of foreseen. And then it'll just be, I don't know, probably mild things about, differences in what to introduce him to and when. Uh, I know that my parents were both big literature people, and every year, kind of for my birthday and not in between, if not in between birthdays, starting maybe when I was 7 or 8 years old, my parents would give me, some of the famous works, Brave New World, Catcher in the Rye, stuff like
Hmm.
that to read. And I intend to do similar with him, and just to help kind of help him build himself as an individual.
Gotcha. Yeah, so how are you going to raise them? Financial strain sounds like you have a huge mess on your hands.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I
Sounds like a big mess, but I think a mess is what got you to change, and I think making your life even more of a mess is going to continue the change and help
yeah,
reveal
yeah,
however you need to change in the future. All right, Dave, thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I know this may not be all that easy to do, but I think like we started out talking about, I hope talking about it has helped you maybe process it and see some different ways of looking at your life.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, talking about stuff. It's, I know it's one of the posters that's up in the gym that I go to is get comfortable being uncomfortable, and definitely try to embrace that maybe a little more than I used to. Like, oh, I know that buying a house is going to be uncomfortable because X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars is a lot of money, and it's going to be uncomfortable to sign that piece of paper. But you need to get comfortable doing that because it's some of the other people. Another thing that comes from the gym that I know is that just lift heavy things and do it often. That sometimes, whether it's financial or emotional or physical, lifting heavy things is a good way to grow.
Emotions are weights.
Yeah.
And when we're getting used to emotions, we're just getting used to a new weight. I know I use that analogy a lot. It's not really an analogy. It's literally what's happening to your neurological system. It's the same thing. I mean, in different parts of your body, but it's the same thing. So yeah, just take what you learn in the gym and apply it to your life, and I think you're gonna be good. All right,
Very
Dave.
cool.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. Uh, this is usually the part where I say if you want to promote anything, but this is anonymous, so maybe you don't want to promote anything. And
Yeah, no,
take care.
yeah, I don't have a podcast or a book or anything to plug, so
All right, well, take care, Dave, and have a good rest of your day and life for that matter.
yeah, yeah, and you do the same and have a good holiday, Merry Christmas, whatever you prefer to say there.
Christmas is great. I love Christmas.
All right. All right. All right. All right. All right. All right.